it was interesting because you're sharing that, if I'm understanding correctly, you went into specifically um, addiction psychology, if I'm saying that correctly, because that was something that you were working on yourself. Did I understand that correctly, or was this that was something that you were passionate about helping people with?
Well, no, I did have some issues with, alcohol and prescription drugs, and
Okay.
so
Because that was something that I know from an alternative source about you, is that your, if I'm remembering correctly, your approach to challenges or to fears is to really kind of face them head on. And like, if I, let's say I'm afraid of heights, well, I'm gonna go to the highest place I can think of and challenge that fear. If I'm afraid of, I don't know, speaking to people or whatever it may be, then I'm gonna go and face that head on. Can you speak a little more towards that and how that came about being part of you and who you are and what you do?
sure. Well, basically, I was a coward, and I knew it, and I hated myself for my cowardice, but I could not overcome it in a lot of cases. Now, I also was, I guess you could say, courageous in other ways, but in certain ways, I just was a coward. And New Year's Eve, 1979 to 1980, um, I had what's referred to as a very profound spiritual or psychic change, spiritual experience or psychic change. I experienced a connection to God that I choose to call it God because I spent a year once trying to think of a different name, and I couldn't think of anything else to call it other than the universe with a capital U. But
Huh.
I connected to God, and through that connection was able to tap into a source of courage and strength that prior to that I had not been able to tap into. And I began to do a lot of reading and a lot of experiencing with whatever I was afraid of. I was going to walk right into it. Now
Wow.
we're not talking about realistic fear and things that are self-preserving. We're talking
Right.
about, I was afraid of unenclosed heights. So I would go to the top of the stratosphere in Las Vegas and ride their needle ride, which if you've ever ridden, um, it goes straight up in the air and then you come down in the
Wow.
G forces. But the thing about it is you're looking out into about 20 miles of wide open spaces, and there's
Wow.
nothing, just the straps holding you in. So I did that. I was afraid of being in water over my head. So when I tried to get my PADI certificate to be a scuba diver,
Wow.
I couldn't do the swim originally because I would panic anytime I got into the deeper water. So they showed me how to do it with the backstroke and walked me through it, and I went and I got my PADI certificate and I was able to scuba dive. But
Wow.
unfortunately, I went through my air a lot quicker than everybody else because of the way I was breathing. I was
Sure.
afraid of riding a motorcycle, and so I bought motorcycles and rode them. I did have
Wow.
an accident on one, but I ride a motorcycle today, and I'm 70 years old. So,
Wow.
but
Wow.
I ride an old man's motorcycle. It's a three-wheeler. It's a gigantic Harley Davidson. Just to put
Yeah.
a plug in there, but um, and if there was a woman that I saw that I thought was attractive, I would go up to them and just, even if it wasn't anything other than you are incredibly beautiful and I just wanted to tell you, and then I would walk away. I just started to be in the habit of whatever I was afraid of, I was going to face, because it wasn't that I wasn't afraid. I was really afraid, but courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the right action in spite of being afraid.
Wow.
Wow.
And so I developed courage, and it came in handy quite a few times. Actually, there were many moments where I was faced with potentially physical violence with people, and one time in particular, there was a man who was coming around, and he was very upset. His wife was involved with a group of people that we were hanging out with, and he had already accosted somebody. And we were sitting in a Denny's talk in Beaumont, Texas, talking about, and I just, bragged about what I would say to him if I saw him and how I would handle the situation. And lo and behold, God has a real sense of humor. And as I was walking out of the restaurant, there he was right in front of me.
no.
And he was a very tall, muscular, truly a redneck. His neck
Oh,
was
gosh.
exceptionally red. And he was standing in front of me, clenching his fists. And I felt like one of those cartoons where you see the heart kind of
Yeah.
bouncing out of the chest.
Mhm.
And I looked him in the eye and never took my eyes off of his eyes. He asked me some questions. I gave him the answers that I said I would give him in the restaurant. And I knew at any moment he could, literally beat the crap out of me. And he just turned around and walked away.
Wow.
And I had that happen numerous times. People just wanting to do violence. And like I said, it wasn't that I wasn't afraid. I was afraid, but I wouldn't let the fear dictate what I did.
Wow.
And out of that, out of those experiences and a growing experience, of also doing something that goes along with that is I also learned around that time, and when I went back to school at 40, this other stuff was around 27, 28, my late 20s, and other experiences, living in places around the world. But I took that experience and turned it into that whatever was uncomfortable, whatever I didn't like, I did that first.
Wow.
Because realistically, that's how you spend the least amount of time with things you don't like or are uncomfortable, is you do them right away and they're done and over with.
Wow.
Procrastination means you spend the most time with the uncomfortable, dislikable stuff. And so when I went back to school, I just did everything really, really right away. I turned in my dissertation like 8 months before I graduated.
Wow.
And cruised my last semester, which was really nice.
Wow.
Nice.
And it was just that, and that has served me really well. So that's how I come by that kind of stuff.
That's incredible.